Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Library Talk and everything else. I'm your host, DJ JC. Today is Thursday, April 24th, and I'm really happy and really excited because, again, I have a very special guest in the studio, Mr. Rick Nájera. He is the deputy chief for the Brownsville Fire Department, but not only that, he is also my best friend. So thank you so very much, Rick, for being in the studio today.
No, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here, Joel.
You have the distinction, my friend, of being the guest that has been on the show the most times.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take
and
that.
and so I thank you so much for being here. I know you're very busy, and one of the best things about the show when you come on is that you and I get to have lunch afterwards. So I'm really looking
I like
forward to
that
that.
part. Yeah,
Really
I
looking
like that
forward
part
to that.
too. But
So no, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We are going to be talking about fire safety, which we've already spoken to Rick about before, but we want to expand on that. We want to expand on a little more on what firefighters, first responders go through on a daily basis, the training that gets them ready to go out there and fight these fires and do all of these courageous things that they do daily. But what is the toll that they also take from that? The emotional toll, the physical toll. So I've asked Rick to come onto to the show to discuss some of those things. If you're just joining us for the first time, thank you so very much for discovering the show. If you're a longtime listener, we truly appreciate you allowing us to be part of your Thursday mornings at 10. So we are going to look at a research question when we come back from the break. But until then, you are listening to Library Talk and everything else, only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us again after the break. This is Library Talk and everything else. We are here with Rick Nájera, which is the deputy chief of the Brownsville Fire Department. Thank you so much again, Rick, for being here. As I mentioned before the break, you have you have been here 3 times on the show, and every time that I've invited you, it's always been such a wonderful conversation. And I mentioned that because if you want to catch up on some earlier shows, not only of this program, but also some of the wonderful programming that is taking place within Vaquero Radio, you can always go to the Vaquero Radio YouTube channel and check out past episodes of all the various shows, which are wonderfully produced. And I want to thank Jan and Student Media for all their assistance in getting us going, both this episode and all the help and support they've done throughout the semester. We are reaching our final 2 episodes, so I wanted to make sure my friend Rick was back on the show before we ended the season, and looking forward to next week's conversation as well. So again, if you are joining us for the first time, thank you so much for discovering the show. And if you are a longtime listener, we appreciate all your support throughout. So we do ask a research question, and we're going to get started right away because there is a lot that we want to discuss. And I've invited Rick because he has just a vast amount of information. He actually did homework for this.
no, I don't want to be caught off guard. That's the thing. And with you, I never know. I never know with you. You sometimes throw me off a little bit.
I guess that's why we're friends, right? Because we balance each other out.
So I wanted to be. I wanted to be over ready.
Over ready for this. And I thank you for that, Rick. So today's question is going to be, what are the long-term physical and emotional impact of firefighting on first responders, and how do these challenges affect their job performance and overall quality of life? Before we get to that research question, Rick, if students and people are listening for the first time, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you're doing, your profession exactly, and then we'll go ahead and reach into the question.
Right. So good question. For those of you that want to be firefighters and take that leap into this occupation that we call the fire service, it's very easy, so to speak, to get in. All you have to do is take a civil service exam and pass, pretty much. And on that civil service exam, there is just basic knowledge questions. You know, you a little bit of math, a little bit of punctuation, all that good stuff. So if you're good at that kind of stuff, you're going to score high. But one thing that we really don't test for is passion, right?
Okay.
We want those individuals that they're proud of what they do.
Mm-hmm.
It comes from within to help others and be out there serving the community. That's why we are public service, right? We want those type of individuals. Not only the smart, common sense type of individuals, but the ones that it comes from within to want to serve. So all you do is pass that. We put you through a physical agility exam. If you pass that, then we get you on an interview process. I'm one of the ones that conduct the interviews. And then if we're happy with what we hear, then we get you with a one-on-one with the fire chief. And if he likes what you hear, he'll send you out for a medical evaluation, and everything comes clean. You're pretty much a firefighter in the Brownsville Fire Department. That's typically the way it runs. And then once you're in the fire department, there is a lot of training that goes on, and we not only deal with fires and what comes with everybody thinks that we just respond to fires and car fires, house fires, grass fires, that kind of thing. But we're also paramedics. So there's a lot of training that comes involved in that. And there's about a year-long process to become a paramedic. And that goes with clinicals, that goes with ride-outs, all that good stuff that comes along with being a paramedic. And we are first responders. So call comes in and EMS needs help. Well, the fire truck is going to be the first one that goes out there first and checks out the patient and does all that good stuff before the ambulance arrives, because the fire truck has everything that an ambulance has without the being able to transport that patient. So we are firefighters, we're paramedics, and we also have specialized rescue teams, swiftwater dive, hazmat, rope rescue, you name it, they call us out there. And I like to tell everybody that being a firefighter is a problem solver. People call you at their worst, and they expect you to solve all their problems. I think we've talked about this before in your show, that I've been called out when I was working on the field. I was called out for my water line busted. Help me. And it's as easy as just shutting off the main, line, that kind of stuff. But you go from that to the extreme where my baby's not breathing.
Yes.
And they're literally throwing their baby at you. And I think this is a good segue, right? Into what we're going to talk about. But people are literally handing you or throwing you their loved one and saying, do something, and they expect, I tell this all the time, they expect a doctor, they expect a psychiatrist, they expect a respiratory therapist, they expect a surgeon. They expect all that rolled up in one when you arrive on scene.
And so, segue into our research question. I'm sure your adrenaline's going when you go to any call, especially you mentioned, all the training that you go through, but nothing can prepare you, I think, when you are, like you said, handed a situation like this. And so there are several different things that we want to take a look at, the emotional, the physical strain that you guys deal with. But what do you tell your people that you lead into a situation like that, Rick? How do you ready them for something like that? And okay, you may ready them for that and they may be able to handle it, but what happens when they go back to the station? What happens when they go back home? How are they supposed to deal with that? So when I was preparing for this show, and you were as well, I started looking at the emotional toll, and you're talking about some of the things and the psychological impact of things. I mean, including like the PTSD or trauma or just this burnout or, these other risks that you go to when you do go back home, maybe at the end of the day. How do you put those things in check?
Yeah. And those things, Joel, they're hard to talk about. And I want to bring up this stigma that's out there with PTSD,
okay,
and how it relates to the fire department or the fire service in general. And when we think of PTSD, and we'll pose that question, right? What's the first thing you think of when I say PTSD?
I'm thinking people that come back from the military,
Right?
And they're shell shocked. Or they have gone through these things and seen some of these things.
100%. Yeah, and yes, 100%. That's exactly what you think of when you think of PTSD. But if you break down PTSD and what it stands for,
Yes.
right? It deals with all types of trauma.
Yes.
All types. And believe me, out there listening, and I don't want this to be a pity session by no means,
no.
right? By no means, because I didn't get drafted into the fire service. Nobody came knocking on my door and saying, "Hey, we need you here." This was my decision to make because, like I talked about it earlier, I have that heart to help people, right?
Yes.
But when you think of PTSD, I want to bring awareness to the public, really, and what the reality of being a firefighter is. We deal with those emotional stresses.
Yes.
We deal with the physical strain on our bodies, all that good stuff. And when you think of a firefighter, you think of a firefighter running into action, running into a burning building. We all see the Hollywood, right?
Yeah,
You know,
and that's the thing, and we've heard this of whenever everybody, including us, are running out, you guys are running in.
right. Yeah, but this is what we want to talk about, and it's often less talked about, is the emotion and psychological toll that
Yes,
comes with that
exactly.
type of responsibility, right? So PTSD in the fire service is very real, right? It's very real. I talked about a call, and that literally throwing a baby into your hands.
Yes.
My wife can attest to that, and the people close to me, like yourself.
We've talked about this
We've
before,
talked
yeah.
about this, and that is one of the calls I went to, right? Where one morning call comes in, and you know that's a real call when they're handing you the baby and the baby's not breathing.
Yes.
And they're saying do something, and you're expected to do something. But it's more common than people think, the PTSD. So I want to share with you a little bit of a stat.
Okay.
And this is an eye opener. It used to be that cardiac problems or heart problems was the number one killer in the fire service.
Okay.
Right? So in 2017, there was a study done, and in 2017 alone, 103 firefighters took their own lives, compared to 93 who died in the line of duty.
Wow.
So isn't that amazing? Like, to think 103 firefighters in 2017 alone. This was several years
Several
ago.
years back.
So that number has gone up.
Oh yeah.
But there was more suicide of a firefighter than there was a line of duty death. And these are just the ones that we know about. These
yes.
are ones that are put out there for
Yeah, are recorded, yes.
Exactly. And experts estimate that about 40% of firefighter suicides are actually reported. So there's 1.5 times more likely to die by suicide than the general population. I thought that number was
Wow.
very amazing to hear, because it's 1.5 times more likely for a firefighter to commit suicide than regular, and not regular individual. I'm talking about just people that go on with their own lives.
Yes.
And have their own occupations. But those numbers, what happens is that when you, and this is what I do, and I know that was one of your questions, and what the department is doing is we need to create a strong support system, right? Number one, strong support system. And you hear that, and a lot of the stuff that we're doing is we're modeling after the military and what they have in place already, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Exactly.
Right? Don't reinvent the wheel and all that good stuff. So we have employee assistance programs. Sometimes those are a little generic and cookie cutter. But what we've done, at least with our department, is we've implemented an actual support system. There is a face on the other side, and people can relate to that individual. A lot of times, employee assistance programs, what they do is they don't understand the demand, psychological demand that a firefighter goes through, right? So they'll just hear a problem, and it's blah, 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 trauma, blah, 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 psychological, blah, 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 dying, right? But when you hear about, when you're talking to a real firefighter about what's going on, they can relate to what you're talking about because they've lived it, right? So what we've done is we've created that support system where individuals can reach out to these individuals, several in our department, and they can tell them, hey, look, you know what? I'm going through this, and I need help. So we'll talk about it, and we'll not with me. No, nobody from the administrative staff is involved in this for that reason, that we don't want to be included in that. We want regular firefighters that are out in the field doing this job to be part of that support system. We also have a chaplain there to support and all that good stuff. So that's what we're trying to do, to kind of bring awareness to the public and bring awareness to those individuals, because I'm a third generation firefighter. There is no way that they talked about this. My grandpa talked about this. My dad talked about this, right? There's no way they talked about it. It was, that's your job. Do it, suck it up, and move on, right? But what that does is it starts creating problems where now I'm sucking it up. I have this trauma that I'm going through. Now I take it home.
Yes.
Right? I take it home and I take it out on my kids. I take it out on my wife, my dog, my cat, whatever it is. I start taking that, lashing out. And a lot of these things, they lead to depression, anxiety, anger, complete emotional numbness, right? Where you're numb to everything. And when you have a strong support system at home, you can come home and you can start talking about those problems. And not that you're showing a sign of weakness. This by no means says that you're weak when you talk about this, but people need an outlet somehow, right?
And sometimes people will turn to alcohol and substance abuse because that's an outlet that, I don't really want to talk about my problems with anybody. I don't really want to talk to the resources that are being provided. What are they going to think of me? What are my colleagues? What are the other firefighters? What are the other men and women that I work with going to be thinking about if I tell them, hey, you know what, this was a really traumatic call for me? I think one of the things that kind of got me going on this whole thing, Rick, and you and I have spoken at length with this, is one time you told me, and I just, it just really, just this story, and I'm sure you remember this, when you told me that sometimes you have to go pick up bodies in resacas in the river.
Oh, yeah.
I remember you always telling me that story. And the times that you've been here, we've talked about fire safety and we've talked about the holidays and so forth. But we had kind of kept a pin on this conversation about what it is that you go through. And I always go back to that story because we think, oh, you guys run into these fires, you take care of these fires. But there's so many other things that you're doing like that, like getting on a boat and getting, these bodies that are deceased. And that just, to me, is not something that I could do. So I mean, my hat's off to you and the rest of these firefighters. And again, this is not just a Bronzeville-centric show, from across the valley and across the United States. And I mean, you were telling me that there were fires in California, and at some point they were going to send firefighters out there from here, right?
Yeah.
And so it's this fraternity, this group of people, that a family, that you do this together. But again, we don't want to talk to our family about some of these problems that we're having. We don't want to talk to our friends. And that's easy to do, isn't it, Rick? To say, hey, I went through this, and what do you think? Instead of talking to a professional.
Yeah, and sometimes you don't need that professional. Sometimes you want another buddy. You want another close friend.
Yes.
You want a wife, a husband. You want a cousin to talk to. You don't want this professional to, okay, well, have you talked to anyone else about this? And what do you do when you feel this way? And this and that. I don't want to hear those clinical questions. I don't want to hear those cookie cutter questions. I want to hear, hey, look, I'm going through this. What have you done in the past, because you've lived it? What have you done to overcome this, right? So if an individual comes to me and says, hey, look, Rick, right? Because when I talk to these individuals going through this, there's no rank involved.
Yes.
So, hey, look, Rick, I really got a problem with this, or I need to talk about this. All right, let's talk about it, and this is what I do, right? This is what I do to overcome this. So you want to hear that. You don't want to hear, okay, well, time's up. Now we got to move on to another, part. And does this affect you? Did this trauma come when you were little? And I don't want to hear that. I want to hear the genuine responses, right? So, yes, there is a lot of psychological trauma that happens when you get called. So the Brownsville or the fire department in general is like a catch-all. We go out there and we pull bodies from the river. We get on boats. We do the things that people don't want to do, right?
Exactly. And I remember that was that conversation that you and I were having, and that one just it just freaked me out because and people that know me, that's one of the things that I don't like is dealing with death and dead bodies and so forth. And you're telling me, and you're just talking
Yeah.
about it so nonchalantly, like, yeah, well, we went to the I'm like, oh my goodness, really? And
It's
it is
tough.
difficult.
And there was a time that, and not to get into any specifics, I don't want to scare away your listeners, right? But there was a time when I was a driver pump operator, and we responded out to a drowning of a whole family, right? A whole family that drowned in their vehicle,
Yes.
and that took a not at the time. At the time, you're doing your job and you're rolling with it, so to speak. But there is calls in my head right now that I can recall vividly. And there's certain times where I can be passing through the expressway or through a certain street, and those calls will just
Come back.
come back. And that is a form of PTSD. And listen, we want to make sure that we're calling it like it is. PTSD is not a weakness. PTSD is a trauma that you're going through, an injury,
Yes.
so to speak, right? So we want to make sure that people understand that. When you talk about PTSD, a lot of times you'll hear individuals talk about it in the military. They witness their
Their
fellow
buddies and so forth go through something
yeah
like that.
go through something and die right in front of you, and that is some real emotional and physical trauma
Yes.
that you're going through. So my hat's off to those guys in the military. Thank you. If you're listening and you served in the military, thank you so much for that. But there is real PTSD in the fire service with stuff you see. You can go your career and see thousands of things that you don't want to see ever, and you don't want to have to go through in your own life, but that's the reality of it. And my kids, all the time, I got two, and one of them's in the fire department, the other one's in college in Huntsville. And growing up, when they got their license, it was always, okay, you're going to be home by this time, right? Because I know what's out there. And not that I'm trying to be a helicopter parent or anything like that, but the reality of stuff out there and stuff that I've seen in, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the
Yes.
morning. And some of that is really bad trauma, right? Physical trauma to that person, but
Yes.
you don't want to see that,
exactly.
right? But you know that you signed up for this job, and
Yeah.
and this is something you got to do. I've cut people out of cars. I've, pulled people from the river, done CPR on an infant, done CPR on an individual where their son is standing right over you saying you better do
Of
something,
course.
right now to bring them back. Those kind of things are like, hey, and now, not now, but my son's 21. He just turned 21. This is something that we really need to bring to light also, is we're expecting a young individual, just like the military.
Yes, that's right.
To go out there and perform at a high level. And then we expect them to move on and carry on and do their job like the way they were trained to do. And that is tough
It
for
is.
an individual to perform at that high level. And this is another thing that when we talk about what that brings, right, to an individual, not only the physical part of but it also brings that when you get, or when you're expected to perform at that high level, there can be a real psychological trauma that you deal with where, man, I'm burnt out,
And that's one of the things as I was doing my research is that burnout. That, man, I went in thinking this was going to be a career, but after a while, after 2 years of doing this, I'm burned out. I can't do this anymore. and that happens.
Oh yeah, 100%. Anytime you're dealing with a form of burnout, you're dealing with that PTSD, and it can affect your focus, your decision making, your ability to really communicate. A lot of people will kind of fall back and like, I don't want to go out. I don't want to,
Yes.
talk to people, and kind of shelter within themselves, and
Yes.
kind of, hey, I don't want to be out there talking to people because of what I went through or what I'm going. And listen, I want people to understand this too, that a lot of times you don't know yourself that you're struggling with that. It's just something that happens within you where, you know what, I don't feel like doing that. And I don't, and
And
you
why am
can't,
I going through that?
and yeah, and these people will seek out professional advice and maybe go to the MD and say, hey, doc, listen, I'm going through something, right? And they can't put their finger on it. But in the back of their mind, all this stuff that's piling on that this individual has not been able to
Express.
express. Yeah, exactly. They haven't been able to go out there and talk to other people about it. It starts weighing on them. And then now it starts manifesting in other ways. And you're like, oh, that's what it was,
Yes.
and that's why I was kind of like getting myself, I don't want to go out. I don't want to see people. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to do all that. So, because it starts affecting you in that way too.
Yes, physically. This is such a wonderful conversation, Rick. I want to talk when we come back from the break about, and you mentioned it a little bit, and we'll talk some more about the job performance, how some of these things are affecting your job performance, and the impact of the quality of life that you can lead. I, again, know and have known you for many years. You have a wonderful and beautiful family. I know your son just turned 21, as you mentioned, and is a firefighter. And you said we're asking a lot of these people. So I want to know more about that and what your advice to him was as he began his career with the fire department. Again, thank you so much, Rick, for being here. You're listening to Library Talk and everything else only on Vaquero Radio. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much again for tuning into Library Talk and everything else. I am here with my friend, Mr. Rick Nájera, and we're having such a wonderful conversation. The only thing about this, we talked about the good thing is that obviously you being in the studio with me and then get to go to lunch, but the time goes by so fast with every guest that I've had. Every time it goes by so fast, and we need to expand on some of these things. That's why you've been here 3 times, because we wanted to talk about some of the things that we couldn't talk about the first show. We couldn't talk about the second show, and now that you're here, this is such a wonderful conversation, and I really do appreciate you taking time from your job to be here. But I think it's important because we have listeners that are coming to college and might think, hey, you know what, this might be something that I might want to do, or maybe my brother or sister is thinking about becoming a firefighter. And so I'm going to segue into your son, whom I know, I know your whole family, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to be part of your family because we've been friends for so long. But your son Rick, who you said just turned 21 this past weekend, right, on the 20th,
Right.
and he is a firefighter. So I want to ask you, as he was making some decisions into going into fire service, what did you tell him? But I remember you and I have spoken a lot about this too. He had a vision from a long time ago that this is what he wanted to do, right?
Yeah, yeah,
He
definitely.
did. I remember that.
So I still have the article, and I think we
Yes,
talked
we
about it
talked
the
about
last
that.
show. I still have the article where he said he wanted to be a firefighter,
Yes.
and I showed it to him the other day because, anyway, I was showing it to him the other day. I was going through some stuff that my dad had,
Yes.
in his house, and I showed it to him, and I'm like, look, Ricky, ever since you were little, you were like
Yes.
4 years old, 5 years old. No, he was younger than that because I joined he was about 3.
Okay.
And I said, look, ever since then, you wanted to be a
Yes.
firefighter. But so firefighting is a great profession, especially here in Brownsville. We make really good money. We do what we love to do. And are you going to get rich from being a firefighter? No, by no means you are. But you get paid well for doing what you do, and the community expects you to perform at that
Yes.
high level. So thank you to all the city leaders and everybody out there that recognize that in the public service and say, you know what, thank you for everything you do, and you're going to be compensated well. Thank you for that, right? I appreciate that. So in talking to Ricky about joining the fire department, he was like, there's no plan B. His plan A was to be a firefighter for Brownsville.
Yes.
Right.
I remember
And
that.
so he took the necessary steps to accomplish that, which he took firefighting in high school and he became certified in high school. He took his EMT in high school, became EMT certified in high school. So that says a lot when we're doing an interview and we're saying, hey, what have you done to like put yourself there and say, hey, I want to be a firefighter. And, what have you done? And these individuals sometimes will be like, well, I heard from a friend of a friend that it was a great job, And then other individuals, and I'm not trying to puff up my son or anything, but other individuals will say, look, I've always wanted to do public service. I took these steps to being a firefighter, and this is what I want to do. I want to help people, and I want to feel that sense of accomplishment, right? When I do something, a task, and we need those individuals. Those are the ones we need. So talking to Ricky, that's one thing I said. I go, hey, it's very physically, mentally demanding, but you're gonna have a sense of fulfillment at the end of the day that you did this. And when he first got hired, before he started his paramedic school that he's in right now, he was we call it on the box, right, on the ambulance, working as an EMT on the fire truck as a firefighter. And he got to get that firsthand, that feeling of accomplishment, the feeling of fulfillment where you help somebody, they're going through this pain or they're going through this agony, you give them a medication, calm them down, talk to them, all those things, right? You go to a motor vehicle accident and their leg is all mangled or whatever, and you're there helping them out,
Yes.
and you get them to the hospital safely, and you know that they're going to be okay, and you talk to them. That feeling is, you can't replicate that,
Yeah.
right? That's something that gets fulfilled, and he loved it, and that was one of the things that I was kind of like, does he want to be a firefighter only because myself
Yes.
and his grandfather and his great grandfather?
Yes.
But when I actually heard him come home and talk about the calls and do those things and like the stuff I used to do right when I
Yes.
first started, and he would get excited, his eyes would open up and he'd get excited talking about it. And, he'd come and talk to my wife and myself, and I did this and I did that. And this is how I handled this, and this is how, and, it was, I felt a great sense of pride
Yes.
in when he would talk like that. But
And you talked about at the beginning about that passion. You can take a test, you can go through it, but do you have the passion for it? Is this something that you've thought about when you were young? Is this something and you said it earlier too, the explanation right now. Oh, my buddy told me to just come and take the test, and my buddy told me to apply.
and I don't say that, Joel or DJ JC. I don't say that because I've never heard it. I'm telling you, when I sit on the interview board, so I hear these firsthand. Oh, my best friend is a firefighter, and he told me it's a great job. Or my dad was a police officer. No joke. My dad's a police officer, and he said join the fire department because being a police officer is too demanding. I'm like, what? Right? Like, okay, but are you doing it because somebody told you to do it, or are you doing it because you have those what do they call them? Intrinsic motivators,
Yes.
right? Like those are the ones that help you perform well, and you want to help. Like it comes from within to want to do those things. You're proud of your job.
Yeah, because you can go through the classes, you can go through all of that, but if you don't have the passion for it and the drive to want to succeed
Drive.
in it,
That's a good word. Yeah, the drive.
because I mean, yeah, it's just a job. I'm just doing this for a while. No, this is something that, like you said earlier, we are depending on you guys to come
And
and
and I talked to the guys extensively about, you know, I say, especially when I'm interviewing them, this is not a job, right? Yes, a job is something and the reason I say that because a job, in my eyes, I feel it as a task, something you really don't want to do, but you know you have to do
Yes.
it, right? That's a job. This is a profession, right? This is something that we get to do, right? You are allowed into our fire service kind of inner circle.
Yes, we talked about it earlier.
Yeah, you
The
get to,
brotherhood and the sisterhood of this.
right. You're privileged to be part of this because there can be 100, 200 people signing up to take the exam and people pass the test. But when it comes to, putting on the gear and climbing the 100-foot ladder and going through a smoke-filled room and carrying that weight
Or
on you.
finding out, oh, wait a minute, I don't get the holiday break. I have to
Yeah,
work.
wait a
I'm
minute.
working 24-hour shift,
Yeah.
48 hours off.
Exactly. You get to do this stuff, right?
Yes.
You get to be part of these specialized rescue teams. You get to be privileged to take part in this. That is a sense of pride. So when I hear people say, "Oh, the job," it's not for me. It's not a job. This is a profession, and you get to do this, right? So having said that, that is something that I really want to drive home to these people coming in and those interested maybe in joining the fire department, not so much here in Brownsville or McAllen, Harlingen, wherever
Yes.
you wind up, right? Know that there is physical, mental, emotional impacts on your body. Cancer. There is
Oh,
a
yes.
big, talking about physical impacts. And I know we talk about trauma and PTSD and all that good stuff, or bad stuff, right? But all that. But you also, firefighters are also 1.5 times more likely to get cancer than regular population because of the fact that we're running into, we call in the fire service, we call IDLH environments, right? Immediate danger to life and health.
Oh, yes.
We're running into those type of environments where, burning building and those sofas, the carpets, the drapes, everything you can think of that's burning, foam, all that is potential carcinogen, off-gassing type of things. So the importance of wearing your mask and breathing air and all that good stuff, we're not doing it. We're not saying to do it because we want to be, strict about this, but we want you to live a long and happy retirement when you
Yes.
decide to retire, because cancer is a big cause of firefighter deaths, after they retire, during their time in service, and just constantly being exposed to that stuff. Now we're dealing with lithium ion batteries, and there's still not a lot of literature out there, but we want to make sure we're taking the necessary steps to get their gear decontaminated and send it off for cleaning, and their regular duty uniform and all that stuff, because we want people to live you work so hard to perform your job and do it well. We want you to live a happy retirement. Enjoy what you did, right?
I remember you telling me when you were a firefighter that you'd be sound asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning,
Oh man.
and these alarms would go off, and you are in deep, deep sleep.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I mean, that's not something just anybody could do. You
Yeah,
know?
and my wife can tell you, I used to be a heavy sleeper. Like before going into the fire department, I used to be a heavy sleeper, and I would think about, man, am I gonna miss a call? Am I gonna miss a call if we get one, and 3 a.m. type
Yes.
of thing, where you're in that REM sleep,
Exactly.
right?
Yes.
But thanks for bringing that up, because I completely forgot about it. But there is a thing that everybody has, and it's called your circadian rhythm,
Okay.
right? And I see you like smirking, right? Because we talked about this.
I know we
before.
talked right before we went on the online here about that, because I was like, man, Rick, you did all your homework.
But yeah,
Maybe.
so a lot of people don't know about it, but there is a thing called your circadian rhythm, and what that does is it regulates your sleep, right? It regulates how you sleep, what kind of sleep you go into, and it kind of it's like a smart battery, right? Or a smart AI, right? The more you do it, the more it learns from it, right?
Yes.
So if you're getting those 8 hours of sleep, you're going to naturally wake up at whatever time, right? If you're getting only 5 hours of sleep, you're naturally going to wake up. And that is part of your circadian rhythm. But what happens is in the fire service where we're working 24 hours on and we get that call at 2 in the morning, 4 in the morning, where you're in that deep REM sleep, your circadian rhythm gets interrupted, right? Now, what happens is when that gets interrupted, that has been caused to be linked with obesity,
Oh, really?
diabetes, depression, cardiac problems, all those type of things. That's what that kind of regulates. So when that gets thrown off on a daily
Yes.
basis, there is going to be some long-term effects on that. So in the fire service, what we're doing is we're trying to. So right now in the Brownsville Fire Department, when the tone goes out to all substations, right? So everybody knows what engine one is going to. Everybody
Oh,
knows what engine six is going to. Even if they're not the responding engine, they know that engine six is going to be going somewhere, right, at 3 in the morning. So what we're trying to work towards is we're trying to get these not silent alarms, but we want to get these alarms to where they will only be toned out at the station that's going to be responding,
I see.
right? So not everybody has to be woken up for something that they're not going to, right? And this is one of the steps that we're taking towards helping with that because what happens when and this is kind of a link to that. So you get up at 2 in the morning, you
From
go
a
to
call
this.
that you're not going to,
Well,
or a
let's say
call that
you
you
are.
are going to.
Let's say
Okay.
you are going to this call, right?
Okay.
So you get up 2 in the morning, you go to this call. Now a regular call, let's just say a general medical emergency, right? Somebody is having heart problems and they need to be transported to the hospital. On EMS, you're looking at probably an hour to an hour and 10 minutes, depending on traffic and if they have a bed available at the hospital, all that good stuff. So you get woken up 2 o'clock, you go to the call. Now, have you ever woken up at 2 or 3 in the morning and felt hungry?
Yes,
Right? Okay, that's what happens. Now you're coming back to the station.
that's true.
Hey, you know what? I'm hungry, partner. Well, why don't we stop and
Yes,
get
a Whataburger.
Whataburger? Why don't we stop and get something like this? Now you can't go back to sleep,
Yes, that's
and
right.
you're up 4, 5 in the morning. Then you start getting tired at 8, 9 o'clock. Now you take a nap. You're asleep till about 11, 12 o'clock. Now you got to go pick up your daughter or your son at school.
Yes,
Now, where do you get that time to work out? Where do you get that time to study? Where do you get that time? And that's where that circadian rhythm starts throwing yourself off. Now you're tired at 11, 12 o'clock, and you got to wake up at 7 in the morning to
yes,
go back to work. And all that gets thrown off. So that leads to obesity, diabetes,
yes.
depression, anger, right? All that good stuff. So,
You hear about the quality of life and the impact of what you do, and you were talking about this, and as I was going through my notes as well, lifespan and these chronic health issues that sometimes come about from dealing with going into fires and and I really liked what you said earlier, that it's not always just physical things that we're going through, but the impact that we emotionally go through, or that you emotionally go through. And you were going to mention something, that you are not alone in this process as you go through these things.
right, yeah, and that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we really hammer home is that you're not alone. There is, you know, thousands of firefighters going through what you're going through, and there is help out there, right? And like I said earlier, and I wrote it down here so I wouldn't forget that we need to stop pretending that this is somebody else's problem,
Yes.
right? PTSD is an injury and it's not a weakness. So we need that stigma of machismo and hey, I don't talk about this, and
I'm fine.
I'm fine, and don't worry about me, and this and that. It's not about that. You can still be a macho man
Hmm.
and talk about what you're going through, because I think that's the real that is the real macho man, to be able to talk about that stuff and do it openly. That's what we want to do. We want to bring awareness that, hey, you're not alone. You're not the only one going through this. Every firefighter deals with it a different way, and this is the way I dealt with it. So maybe it'll work for you. Maybe you need to hear something like that because you want to build off of that. So we 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 wouldn't ignore a firefighter if, let's say we're on the fire ground and we're battling a fire, and this firefighter falls off the ladder, right? And he falls and he breaks his leg.
Yeah, you're not gonna leave him there.
I'm not going to leave him there, right? But because it's physical and we can see it, we act on it immediately,
Yes.
right? But what about the stuff that we don't see?
Yes.
The stuff under,
they're going
that they don't want anybody to see. We want to make sure that if we wouldn't leave a firefighter there with a physically broken leg, I don't want to make sure I want to make sure that I'm not going to leave that firefighter there going through an emotional trauma. You know what I mean? So I just want to end in this, and I want to say that if you are a first responder, a firefighter struggling right now, you're not alone, and it's okay to ask for help. Fire chiefs, department leaders, anybody out there listening or whatever, we need to start building a culture where mental health is a part of the mission. So the toughest thing that a firefighter can do is talk about when they're hurting. And I want you to know that you're not alone, and seek help. There are many programs out there. Ask your fire chief, ask an officer, a fire officer for help, or where they can seek out this help, and know that you're not alone, and talk about it.
Thank you so much, Rick. Honestly, such a wonderful conversation. I think that we tend to just, like you said, we see the physical things, but the mental, the emotional is a lot harder because, like you said, our culture sometimes is that of, I'm not going to talk to anybody. No, I'm fine. I'm okay. I'm all right. And we need to bring that to the forefront. We need to bring an awareness of it and to it. And honestly, thank you so much. This was a wonderful
Yeah,
conversation.
I had a great time, man.
The time goes by really
Yeah,
fast, though.
it does, and always I have it. Anytime you ask me, hey, can you carve out some time? Yes, I want to, because I do want to talk about
And
this.
I know
I
this
want
is
to
really
spend
last
time.
minute, but thank you so much. I
Yeah, for
appreciate
sure.
it. We already running out of time. We're finishing up the semester. We have 2 more episodes left. Well, this one and next week's. And even then, the time of the season just went by so fast. We're already going into May.
I know. I can't
is
believe
crazy.
it. We're almost half of the year.
That is
man.
it.
I can't
We're
believe that
finishing up here.
it's already here.
It is crazy.
Next thing you know, we're gonna start talking about Halloween and Thanksgiving,
Like we did last year.
Yeah, exactly.
But Rick, thank you so much. Honestly, you are welcome
My
to
pleasure.
come back anytime. As my friend, as as deputy chief, I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, all you need to do is invite me, man.
You're always welcome to come back.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Honestly, it's such a wonderful conversation. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like what you listened to, go back and listen to some of the other shows, this show, and we truly appreciate you allowing us to be part of your Thursday morning. Again, one more show next week. Looking forward to it as well. Thank you so very much. You've been listening to Library Talk and everything else only on Vaquero Radio, the Valley's student station.